I can't see them when I'm screen sharing my ice cream PowerPoint. So with that, I will pull up.
Also, let's try something new. I think everyone here has been in like several of our lectures at least. Like maybe just like try chatting with us this time. It is, after all, about bench communication. I don't think you need to PM me your questions anymore. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, the best way to learn is to practice. So just pretend that you're on a bench with An and I and chat with us. Okay, so welcome to our lecture about chatting on the bench, subtitled Adaptability at its Finest, because that's going to be a lot of what this is, because like the hardest bench communication is when like you get a bunch of information dropped on you and you don't really know what to do with it. So a little bit about us. Do you want to?
I would love to.
Okay.
The first thing that is important to know about me and Elyse, core to our identity, we are 2-year Team USA members. We have in fact chatted on the bench before. Actually, chat on the bench yes, I wrote this. I don't know why I had trouble reading it. Every lecture that we've given to you guys so far, we have utilized these strategies of chatting on the bench. So not only is it relevant in your rounds, but it's also relevant in school-like presentations. The next thing that I wanted to outline in terms of about us is that our communication, this is like just fun trivia. Our communication styles are very similar. Give me 1 second to pull up our co-star and I will read to you. Oh yes. Okay. So our Mercuries are in Libra, which is good because Mercury determines how you communicate, talk, think, and process information. It also indicates how you learned. It is the mind's planet. Your Mercuries are both in Libra, meaning your intellect sees both sides to every situation. You're both diplomatic relativists searching for balance in every set of ideas, though this may come off as insincere or indecisive. You communicate and think in similar ways. So that's just like, I think we are very in tune in terms of our communication, which I think bolsters our bench communication. But even if you are incompatible with your benchmates, we will show you how to communicate nonetheless.
Okay, so now that you've heard about our horoscope, we will dive into the material for this. And if you haven't been in us for several lectures, like the About Us slide has slowly gotten more and more ironic. So like we're not as conceited as this slide makes us sound. Okay, things that we're going to be covering in this speech or in this lecture today. So first of all, we're going to be talking about like the strategies, what An and I have done in the past via communication. Second, like when are you meant to be communicating? Which parts of another person's speech, what part of like different aspects of prep, etc. Third, a little spicy addition. How do you communicate online when you're not physically sitting on the bench with someone else? And then finally, we will have a review period where we're open for questions and more time to chat. So these are strategies. I came up with a couple of these. Feel free to add in wherever you think is necessary because we all kind of have like our own things to go. Oh, how do I go back? How do I go back?
Press the left arrow.
I am. Wait,
click on the presentation, then press the left arrow.
Have I lost?
No, you don't need to.
I'm trying. No, please don't delete my. Okay, cool. I tried hitting the left arrow and it wouldn't let me go back. I think this might be a Wi-Fi issue via Northland.
If anything happens, I can always share from my computer.
Yeah,
I don't know that my Wi-Fi is much better, but
I'm at school right now, and one of my school's personality traits is having bad Wi-Fi. So just bear with me for a second. So anyway, okay, so strategies that we talk about. First thing, and I think is the most helpful thing when you have like another person on the bench, is the person who's like not about to give a speech, or in like the best case scenario is not speaking again in the round. So like a first or second speaker that isn't giving the reply, is flagging important issues that just absolutely have to be responded to. Because there are times when the speaker who's about to like go up is going to like be writing or trying to think out rebuttal. And just at some points during all rounds, the next speaker is going to tune out of like what the person currently speaking is saying. And that's obviously it wants to be avoided, but that's no detriment to like an individual person. It just happens sometimes, especially when you're like amidst literally writing something down that you want to say in your speech. So if you have other people like flowing the things that are central to the opposition's case and are like, oh, if they win this, they will win the round, or this is like directly contrasting like a certain idea that we brought to the round, thus like it has to be responded to. Those are usually like the most important ideas that need to be engaged with. It's helpful if you have someone like make a list of those things for you, and if they're feeling like super helpful that day, adding extra responses. Yeah.
It's also like, even if, so I think we all maybe like to think that we're very good listeners, that we can like intuitively understand what's going on in the round, and that if I'm giving the next speech, I'm listening to the person who's currently speaking because I have to respond to them. So obviously I'm going to do these things. Like, yeah, sure, good. I don't really think that's the point, right? I think that oftentimes you don't see, even if you hear the arguments that are being made and you're able to respond to those individual arguments, it can be incredibly difficult if you're so in the weeds of writing your speech to identify the strategy shifts that you see in like another speaker. I'll give you an example here. In our round, the quarterfinal round last year against Canada, we like, the motion was like China hedge, basically. It was just like China's global pursuit of hegemony, good, bad, whatever. The prop one went for like a various like political econ, like a little bit of climate change benefits, but it was just like a laundry list of like good things that China's doing. The second speaker, I gave the op one, so like I was out for the debate, so I was like just listening. The prop two completely pivoted, like, and Elyse, tell me if this, like, you think this is true. Like the prop two pretty much pivoted entirely to focusing on like the economic benefits, and the fact that it was like pretty cleanly extended means that he could strategically choose to drop some of his case in order to like blow up or weigh the economic benefits that China is giving, like basically like Belt and Road Initiative good. So like me on the bench hearing that and turning to Luke, who was giving the op two, and I know was like overwhelmed thinking of like all of these mechanisms, is still responding maybe to some material that was present in the prop one. Me turning to Luke and being like, no, this is what they're collapsing on, you need to be cognizant of that, is really important, because then he knows that he can strategically choose to drop some of Proposition 1's arguments that are no longer relevant to the round. And B, he can choose to more like strategically prioritize our offense, i.e. we did have comparable material on like economic benefits. So if he had chosen to, so like whenever I like told him that, he like chose to like more specifically highlight that. So this is how, even if you're on the bench and you're listening very closely, like Luke is a very good listener, was listening very closely, you may still be immune to like the strategic shifts that are going on, and having someone pay attention and call that out to you is enormously helpful, and is one of the like strategic benefits, in my opinion, of having someone just give a one and then sit down and like listen.
Yeah. So the next thing is kind of like having responses for those ideas. The most complicated thing, like I think as a speaker about to speak, trying to do like before you start speaking, is have like someone, obviously like the speaker has moved on from whatever important thing that your teammate is trying to tell you about. So essentially, if you try and like audibly give responses in the middle of a round, like layered responses, like 1, 2, 3, 4, what you are asking the next speaker to do is sit, listen to you give layered responses, and listen to like this other person like talk about something completely different while simultaneously like trying to construct your own speech. It is ridiculously more helpful if you like take a sticky note or a piece of paper and write down like your responses, and this is important, like your best handwriting, to like physically hand to the next speaker, so they can decide when they're going to go over to those responses in their own time. They can decide like how they want to order them, and they can decide like where it fits in with their case, because otherwise you kind of force them to write down the responses that you have to whatever important argument you're talking about, like literally as soon as they get the information, because like that is the point in time in which like they have to put it somewhere on their piece of paper that like they're using for their speech. I think another important thing is flagging contradictions. I think because like the next speaker is like so into whatever they're writing, they're less likely to hear like case shifts because they're just looking for these overarching ideas. I think it's important to flag what contradictions the other team has made and case shifts, like what if they're like focusing on a different, or they're prioritizing something completely different. This doesn't mean just like examining a different stakeholder. This means they've totally shifted the way in which like they're framing the debate. I'm sure Un has like an example of where this has happened before, but like when you do that, usually they have infringed upon their own offense somewhere, which means that you can like group a lot of rebuttal over one, like under one umbrella of like recognize like this wasn't the information, this was either an infringement on the offense they gave you in like their first speech, or like their strategy, like they realized that they couldn't win on the strategy that they were going for. Here are XYZ reasons why shifting in the like op 3 just like made this around losing like a concession or something. Yeah.
I have two things to say. First is that even though you are sitting on the bench, you're about to give an op 3, you hear the contradiction, you write it down yourself, and you're like, okay, I'll say it. Oftentimes, the way that we explain contradictions is just like, they made a contradiction, you should vote them down. Like, that is not good enough. And it also doesn't tell you, like, it just confuses the judge, right? So like, yeah, they pointed out a contradiction. I don't know what that means for the round. I don't know why that translates into like them losing my ballot and things of that nature. So not only is it important for you to like isolate the contradictions, but it's also important for your teammates to help you tell you why that contradiction loses you the round. It's not enough to simply to flag that it has occurred. I will give you an example here. And I've used this in an example in a lecture before, but it's like specifically applicable to this. And if you weren't in that lecture, then I think it's helpful for you to hear it, because it's like honestly like the best example of like a contradiction happening. Elyse, you like saw this round too. European this year semifinals, the motion was this house would abolish permanent membership in the United Nations Security Council. Can someone explain to me like what that is? And if no one can, I will try to think of a different motion, because that's a bit. Jyothi, can you try to explain to me what that means?
Yeah, just when, like for example, the permanent members are the P5, and so they wouldn't have veto power. And then the non-permanent members are usually rotating right now, so those could like fall into those, but they wouldn't have the veto power.
So basically the debate came down to like USA, China, Russia, France, UK. Should they have veto power? Should they not have veto power? What's the implication of that? Prop 1's case was essentially in the SQO, countries, the permanent members currently veto policies which contradict their interests. This allows them to do things like human rights abuses, right? So China and Hong Kong, Russia and Crimea. The question then is we should be able to override their vetoes, get rid of their veto, so that way we can send peacekeepers and humanitarian aid into these countries and uphold human rights. Op's case was basically just like, that's a really dumb idea. That like directly aggresses China. Like, what do you think happens whenever you send peacekeepers into Hong Kong? Like, that's not going to go well. Like even threats that are like more tangential. So like if Russia blocks aid getting to Syria and like you still send and like you get rid of the veto, but then you still send aid to Syria, like Russia's just going to give more arms to Bashar al-Assad because they still have a vested interest in fighting that conflict. Like there's a reason that they're vetoing it. So we said that in Op 1, that was a pretty clear and like devastating argument to Prop. We extended it clean and then into the like Op 2 and Op 3, and Prop 3 made a pretty new concession. They were like, in response to this argument that Op keeps pushing, obviously no one wants to invade Hong Kong. That's such a bad idea. Like China is going to react massively harmfully. So do you see how this contradicts their argument about like human rights and upholding human rights if they don't want to send peacekeepers into Hong Kong? So then I was like writing my 3 and I was like really in the weeds and I think I'm listening, but like maybe I'm not. So Liana, who was on the bench with me, turns to me and goes like, no, like stop, like you have to listen to this. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I scrapped the first minute of my speech, and I changed my intro to like point out what contradiction had happened, and then I explained like why that lost the round. I don't remember exactly why, but it's important that like you are willing to be adaptable whenever these circumstances present themselves. That's it that I have.
And I think the easiest way to do that, because like that sounds like to some extent a bit complicated, when they make things that you think is some kind of case shift or like strategy shift, try to think out each step in the process of like what they're doing, right? And then look back at the flow that you hopefully already have of like their constructive speeches. One of the things that like just comes with practice in world schools is like when you're it's quite hard like to have three people sitting on a bench together in like perfect unison, right? And like I like to think that we're all relatively like intelligent kids and like choose to like spend all of our free time debating, but like at the end of the day, like a lot of us are like 17-year-olds that like haven't taken like super comprehensive like economics courses. Like we're likely to make mistakes. When you find those mistakes, do what Un says and like try to make them as offensive for you as possible, and just like really prove every step and like every mechanism to which like they lose by conceding some kind of like strategic shift. Okay, so when to communicate can be a bit complicated, especially when you're working with like new teams. I think my overarching like suggestion here would be pretend like the next speaker is always about to ask you for information, especially if you were like the one, you've already given your speech and you're done for the round. While the one is like an important speech for like building up constructive material, one of the ones like just when you're just the one main role is like providing information for the other speakers for the rest of the round. Like the speakers that we generally think like are the best ones on Team USA, yes, are very good at like presenting like substantive material, like preempting, weighing, like whatever. But they're also the individuals who are like going to sit on the bench, flow super diligently, and have pre-written like narratives for other speakers, pre-written responses for other speakers, etc. So a couple of tips like when we're doing this. First of all, try and communicate as often as your speaker wants them to communicate. And this can be something you talk about like before the round even starts. And you can be like, hey, like, just tell me when you want like responses to something. Tell me what you want me to be thinking about. If you need weighing, like let me know. Try not to leave your speaker by themselves, or when they ask for information, be like, oh, I have no idea. And then like go back to doing like whatever else you were doing, unless you were doing something specifically for another speaker, and then just like try and transfer the job that was asked. So second, like adhere to what your other speaker is actually saying. So it will also be annoying and like cause tension between you and the other two people on the bench if like you are constantly giving them information that like they're not asking for and is legitimately not important. Like unsaid, there are like caveats to this, like where Liana was like, no, this is really important. This is like the crux of their case. Those are exceptions. If you are constantly just like a monologue of information, repeating what the other team is saying, that is like one of the top 5 most annoying things that you can do as a like world schools debater. So just like trust your instincts on that.
And it also has to do with like, it also has to do with like 2 things that you can do. One is just like ask, like, hey, like, how do you like to be communicated with? The people that I've never debated before with that I'm like maybe might suspect are a bit chatty on the bench, I'm like, hey, like, by the way, like my preferred communication style is only talk to me if you need something for me to say in my speech. Or like, and if you are thinking I'm talking to you too much, just tell me not now and I'll back off, and it's totally fine. Like I won't get pressed about it. So like having that conversation beforehand about how you like to communicate is good. The second thing I would say is like over time you will learn what your teammates are doing, and even if this is not directly relevant for like GDS per se, it is relevant for whenever you're debating with your school teams, whenever like maybe like some of you will debate on Team USA or whatever. Like this is relevant whenever you are debating with your teams over and over again. Even if it's just for one tournament, it's really important to learn communication styles.
Yeah. And I think the converse of that is also true. So like say you're like listening to someone who's like, oh, like I have something that's legitimately very important to the case. The like sixth most annoying thing you can do as like a reply speaker is be like, no, like be quiet, like I'm writing my reply, and then never listen to them, especially if they flag it as something that's like so crucial to the round that it would be like a voting issue. So try to make time to listen to what the other person has to say, because you're going to look really bad if you don't say what they were talking about in the reply and your other speaker was correct in identifying that it was crucial to the round and like would have either won or lost you the debate. So the third thing is, it's kind of like what we've already said, be ready, have pre-written responses, try to flow super diligently. So if like the next speaker misses like what the tag of the third substantive argument is or something, like it just makes it a lot easier. And that sounds super simple. And you're like, really, is there like that much like power in like knowing what the tag of the third substantive argument? It just makes your next speaker's life a lot easier if they know what the tag is verbatim and they don't have to like spend a lot of time trying to figure it out. And it can just be like a 1 second thing and you're good to go.
Like it got to the point where at Worlds last year, I like was on the first speech, as I mentioned. I started writing my ones like really big on like sheets of like one sheet of paper. I would write one sub on one sheet of paper, and I would literally only say the tag, the overview, and then just list the links, and I would like trust myself to like be able to remember how. And this was helpful because I could literally just pass Luke the sheet, because every single round he would be like, hey, can I have like the links under like each argument, can you rewrite it? So eventually like me learning like that's what he needed, I just started doing it, and like that saved time. The second way that you can do that, sort of like getting ready and prep and like being like efficient with it, is like we do these things on team, like on our team, called like link sheets. Some members of the team like to call it a link list. I personally think link sheet sounds better. Basically wait, Elyse, what do you think? Do you like link list or link sheet?
I like link sheet.
Yeah, see, something crazy. Okay, so for link sheets, basically what happens is like, this is ideally written out in like in prep, but sometimes like it's not. It's basically just like the bare bones outline of your case. So you have the tag of the first sub, each mechanism under it, tag of the second sub, each mechanism under it, and like whatever preemptive weighing, whatever impacts. Like you think that this is like oh, like obvious, or like, oh, like not really important. Like this is so important. And the amount of times that whenever I just have like link sheets, like if I can just pull the link sheet and then use it in my 3, I don't have to rewrite the warrants I don't have to rewrite my mechanisms for each clash underneath the clash on like whatever sheet I'm using. I can just go say like, write a note that says like link sheet sub 1, and then I can choose and like highlight whichever links I'm going to extend there. So like that is sort of a preemptive way to help you save time in like those cases where you need to use it.
That also makes it really easy to identify the links or warrants that the other team didn't engage with, right? So if you get your first speaker to like make little marks next to the links and like what the responses are, if there was any response, and then hand it off to your next speaker, you can literally be like, look at like warrant 2 and warrant 5. There was just no response. You can extend that clean across the flow. And that makes it a really easy way to engage, because hopefully if you're saying like, I have like 5 mechanisms as to why this is true, they're all unique mechanisms. So if there is no engagement, then you can like win off the 2 mechanisms that you have that like cleanly extended. And then you can spend a bit more time like explaining why your other 3 mechanisms are true. You even have like the availability to like drop a mechanism if you think there was sufficient engagement. Be like, even if you bought like their explanation of why mechanism 4 doesn't work, here are the other 4 that do. And then just like win weighing off that.
The last thing I'll say on that sort of thing is that this is different from flowing the prop 1 and just extending the prop 1, because like oftentimes when we flow speech, like this might just be a me thing, like I don't know how to flow, but like whenever I flow ones, I like include a lot of like the unnecessary preferencing or the unnecessary like prefacing or the unnecessary characterization that like makes the argument and is required to make the argument, but it's not like the bare bones link outline. And also if I can write the links out beforehand, then I don't have to waste my time attentively flowing the one. I can start actually preparing my speech. Can I talk about like what about making new arguments?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so sometimes prep is good and fine, and you do a good job in round, but sometimes like, you know, lightning strikes you and then you think of a good new argument that you hadn't thought of a prep that is a good argument for your side, and you want to POI it in, or you want your next speaker to actually use it. I'm going to give the example from last night. Is that okay, Elyse? Or do you have a better one? That's a good one? Okay.
Yeah.
So last night we sparred Mexico, and the motion was like, this house believes that, what was the motion?
It was essentially like there would be a direct vote on individual legislative bills, and the remainder, like the percent remainder of the population that didn't vote, like their portion of the vote would be decided on by a representative. So it's like if 60% of Texas votes, Ted Cruz gets to cast the last 40% of the vote.
Yeah. So one of the arguments that we had, like basically, like you can tell the prop cases, like we get good bills passed, like gun reform and climate change things and stuff like that. We like didn't think of this argument in prep, but in prop 2, I POI'd this argument in, which is like climate change reform is extraordinarily expensive. Renewable energy requires that you tax the middle class. Like addressing coronavirus requires you to do things that like directly contradict individuals' interests, i.e. force them to stay at home and shut down their businesses. Why are people likely to vote for the policies which are necessary on your side of the house? So like that's like a good, decent argument that we hadn't thought of in prep, that I thought of like as soon as I heard the Prop 2's intro, and then we POI'd it in. And then I texted Elyse and I was like, hey, did you hear that? And she was like, yeah. And so I was like, oh, can you extend it in the next speech so I can have access to it in my 3? And that's how we sort of like made a whole new argument like out of thin air just from a POI. So it requires you to like communicate that you are thinking of a new argument, tell your next speaker like here's what the argument is, can you please extend it, and then just like trust that they'll do it. But Elyse is great at that, so yeah.
Yeah, so that works in those instances. Just when you're trying to do that and like work in a new argument, kind of not in like a sneaky way, but in a way that like you have to like self-acknowledge that was not actually in your constructive material. Try your best to use almost like the exact same language as your previous speaker, because that makes it sound like way more like it's a similar argument, especially for judges who just like don't buy new material in the 3. Like it is solely extensions, solely new examples. If you use the same language, like call the argument the same thing, like Anna and I did a relatively good job of calling it like the interest of the individual. And because that language was like the same, it sounded like it was just like an argument that was being extended through the flow.
You can also disguise these things, right? So like no argument that you can think of is going to be like so drastically different that it's like not like it doesn't correlate to anything else in your case. So in what I chose to do to disguise that new argument in my 3, I used the same language of Elyse, like she just said, but I also was like, note that this is just merely like Elyse just extended this mechanism about worsening the quality of legislation, which is like it's what it does, but like you kind of hide it in an argument that you already did make. And that way you have access to it clean.
Yeah. So the last thing I would say is just try to be as efficient as possible. This means basically if you're going to try and do this audibly, know exactly what you're going to say and try and like pretend like it's like asking a POI, right? Like if it means writing it down so you can say it verbatim to how you want to say it, do that. But just try and find the language that'll get the point across as efficiently as possible, because there's like it's equally as annoying for like someone to just like talk in circles about like 5 like nebulous reasons for like 30-45 seconds while I'm trying to write a speech, because like even though one issue is probably pretty important, I also have like 10 other issues that I need to reconcile in like 3 minutes before I get up and give my speech. So just like try to be careful about that. So this all like comes with practice and like knowing your teammates, getting to know your teammates, which I know is hard like in this setting, because not only do you probably not know each other very well, but you don't really have the opportunity to meet each other because it's all like via online. So this is just going to be something that like takes practice and like getting used to different styles of communication that different people prefer. Okay, so
Elyse, do we want to take like a 3-minute break or no?
Yeah, we can. This is kind of like our midway point in the lecture. So if you guys need to go to the bathroom, get coffee, get water, anything, this would be your opportunity to do that. If you have any questions at this point, also feel free to chat with us about those questions.
Yes, Elyse and I will be here to chit chat. Oh, be back at 12:08. That round this morning was so fun.
What?
That round this morning was so fun.
The Canada one?
Yeah, I kind of wish we were in it.
Yeah. I don't know. What speech did Angela give? Was it the one?
She gave the one for it, yeah.
Oh,
Bro, her intro was like deadly. Like that was so good.
I don't think
Did
it
you hear it?
No.
No.
Oh wait, yes, I did. I did follow her intro.
I was like, that is so, like her intros are always so strategic.
The framing at the top of her one was also very good.
They're just really good.
Also, when she says things, I just like believe it, you know?
It's so reasonable.
Like she was like, this cuts into the offense in their first substantive argument and contradicts like their stance. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it does. I know full well it doesn't. But I'm like, oh, she's
Like,
right.
no, it doesn't, but like you're like, oh my god, she's probably right. The Canadians just sound so reasonable.
I love their voice. My favorite part is like the like little pieces of language they use. Like you brought us a host of ideas in second. I'm like, I love the host of ideas.
Whenever Angela used Tim Hortons as an example, that was so cute. Tim Hortons, you thought.
I really enjoy Canadian language.
Oh my god, the POI that was offered in the 3, did you hear it?
No.
Oh my god, Jack was like, the murder rate in Mexico was so, Jack was basically like, the POI was like, Mexico is pretty bad, huh? And then she was like, it's not about Mexico, it's about Africa.
It really isn't. Like, I didn't understand that argument at all. They tried to shift it away from Latin America. I was like,
even if it is about Africa, like, or like Southeast Asia, like, what about it? Like,
it's not. Like, I don't think that that's
also,
the debate.
It's not. It's really not.
I was like, this is very clearly about Latin America.
Why wouldn't they just go to like Europe?
Well, it's because Europeans also aren't letting them in. But like the question is, how do they get to the US? Like,
yeah, that's like, what you gonna do? Yeah, that's much harder. Anyways.
Okay, it is 12:08, so whenever people would like to join us again.
And we will cut that part from the recording.
Okay, so I think this is was this the idea that you wanted to talk a little bit about, and I will add on?
Yes.
What?
First, this is going to be about jumping ship. So sometimes some things happen in round, you didn't think about it well enough, or they're really, really good and they make some like good arguments, or, you know, one of your teammates answers a POI poorly and you don't know like how to come back for that. So now we're going to be talking about how to jump ship when you need to jump ship. We're specifically calling this jumping ship for John May because we understand that that's how he understands content. Okay. The first thing that we're talking about, Yep. Okay. So let's talk about what leads you to jumping ship. Does anyone have any personal experiences of like sometimes where like you felt like you didn't know what to do, you didn't know what arguments to make, you feel like your case was like completely shot, like, and you didn't know what to do? Does anyone have any examples of that they want to communicate? Okay, so no one has ever had to adapt in round. That's so incredible. Please teach me how to debate then. I would love to know how you write cases where you don't have to adapt.
This is why you were voted top 5 GDS scariest staff.
Okay, well, only by Hockaday, so, I mean. I'm going to start cold calling on people who, I mean, that's fine. You guys don't have to talk. Okay, I will give personal examples. One is like, it's like the scariest thing in the world, correct me if I'm wrong, at least, to get offered a POI in the first, which you don't know how to answer, because if you answer it incorrectly, you functionally like screw your team, like you screw the backbench. So there are like varying degrees of this, right? The first one, here, we'll give you an example. This house would abandon decapitation as a counterterrorism strategy. Decapitation in this instance does not mean, as I thought, cutting the heads off of people. It means the other thing, which is like the leader, like it means assassinating leaders, right? Not necessarily by like cutting off their heads, but just like assassinating leaders, yeah?
The link is the head of the organization.
The head of the organization.
Decapitation.
Yep. Anyways, so prop got offered a POI in this instance, which was like, what are sorry, I'm just thinking top 5 scariest. The prop got offered a POI, which was like, are you going to announce this policy? Honestly, if I got offered that POI, like, if you have to answer really, really quick, like you don't have time to think about it. You don't have time to think about the implication of your answer. So you might say like, no, probably not. Because like the intuitive thing is like, you don't want to give the terrorists like a leg up, you know? So like maybe you answer like, no, we won't tell them. Op 1 will probably make fun of you for that and say they literally access none of their benefits. If people still think that the US government is going to kill you, you do not access your benefits about negotiations or coming to the bargaining table. You do not access your things about like creating like less invasive missions because people still perceive you to be an existential threat and therefore still like attack you whenever you come, even if you're coming to like help. Then like what can Prop 2 do? It is like there are varying thoughts on this, but like I generally think you can't just be like, oh, we changed our mind, we're going to like tell them, you know what I mean? Elyse, do you disagree?
No, I think you probably have to stick with the same thing.
You probably have to stick with it. And if you don't, then like if you say like we change our mind, then like Prop 3 is, or like Op 2 is literally going to be like they are trying to skew this debate by shifting stances and never actually telling us what their policy looks like. And then the judges, especially world's judges who are like all about consistency, are going to be like, yeah, no. Anyways, so if you do that, then like you can only really like build yourself back up from there. So I think that you can make an argument that's like eventually terrorist organizations will catch on. They will know that no one is shooting at them. They will like see that like there is no present threat of decapitation, and eventually all of our impacts will materialize. It's just a question of short-term versus long-term. I think that's probably like the best way to like save the model. Do you disagree, Elyse?
No, I think that that's correct. That would be the correct
so sometimes you have to do things that like save it. I'll give you another example. The motion was like, this house supports duty to rescue laws. Duty to rescue is just like if you see someone like in peril, you have to like help them. This is like a law in Germany and stuff like that. Like you can be like charged if you don't like save someone who's like dying on the street. So like given that there's not like a clear present threat to your to your life by like helping. So our model like limited like if you have like any like sort of like physical disability, then like you do not have to like like law doesn't really apply to you because like obviously it's quite difficult to like get involved in that way. POI I like gave the Prop 1 in this round and I got POI'd and I like someone was like, okay, what about people with PTSD? And like I didn't know how to answer it, and so I like answered it poorly. I didn't like take a definitive stance, which is like probably like maybe a correct strategy if you don't know how to answer a POI at all. I should have just said like, yeah, obviously, because like PTSD is like a mental, like it's like a mental like disability, not like necessarily like a mental disability, but like it's like it necessarily restrains your ability to like interact with the world, meaning like it's probably fine if we qualify this as like a disability. And then like so I didn't do that. I kind of just like skirted around it and moved on. And then like I didn't say like we will force people with PTSD to do these things. And then the two like kind of like recovered it and saved it by like obviously PTSD is a mental disability. We're not going to force people to do these things. Like that was kind of a weird POI we got. So like that's a way that you can deal with it. If your first speaker doesn't explicitly take a stance, you can usually kind of just like shimmy and save it. Do you have anything to add, Elyse, on that?
No, I think that's basically it. I think my best piece of advice for like answering POIs that are like that are like, would you support this with the assumption that it's like principally consistent? First of all, for those of you who are in our lecture yesterday, the first response is like doing what did in round 8 and being like, you have to prove why it's principally consistent first. Unfortunately, that has become like a pretty common USA strategy, and especially in earlier years, we did that a ton. So other teams have got a bit cleverer, and will explain the principal consistency in the first part of their POI and then ask if you would still support it. In those instances, just try your best to like debunk what the principal link is. So for instance, in the same round that Un was talking about, the duty to rescue laws, I was on op, and basically I was making the argument saying that like you as an individual do not have the obligation to protect like this random other person in society, especially if it puts like your own life at risk. And the other team stood up and they were like, then why do like parents have the obligation to like take care of their children, even though like it's like theoretically just another person in society? And I had to like de-link what the like why it was probably more likely there was some level of consent in like the relationship between a child and a parent than there was for like two random people walking on the street. So it's just like trying to delete that. Yes, for the person who has a question, yeah, question, what's up?
For like jumping ship, can you give like a non-answer for like, because I was thinking for like the decapitation question, you could just say, we'll stick with like the national security strategies of targeting terrorists in the status quo, like on how they release information. Would that be worse than giving an answer? Or would it give your like team time to like think of a response?
I think it's better than saying no, but I don't think it's very good, because it's like you're basically saying like you can say that you're going to stick, but like I just don't get like I think it's better than saying no, but I don't think that it does anything for you in the debate, and I think it like still leaves opposition room open to like.
I think the best answer to that POI is regardless of whether or not we announce the policy, eventually these terrorists are going to realize that the heads of the organizations like stop getting assassinated by foreign entities. And even if that's not like an all-encompassing like answer to their question, you did give some legitimate response and you didn't have to have a formal stance on it, so you can talk to your teammate about that later.
Wait, I think the best answer to the POI is just yes. Like, yeah, we tell them.
Assuming that you don't know the answer. Assuming you don't know the answer is meant to be yes. That's the second best answer to the POI.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The other thing about jumping ship is like sometimes it's not about POIs, but I think that's like the most common thing where you have to like radically change your strategy because like POIs are not things you can predict. Another thing is like if they like present like really good refutation, sometimes you just have to drop and collapse on things that are more important. So if you spend the entire Prop 1 like arguing this principle, this is why like whenever you include weighing in the Prop 1, you should not ever say like this is single-handedly the most important issue in the round if you haven't heard their material, because like what if their material just beats you? You pigeonhole yourself basically. And if that's the case, then like you in the like the backbench should have a discussion like, okay, are we just kicking out of this? And if that's the case, then like cool and move on, but just talk about it and then decide. I think that's it.
So when you do decide to do this, like jump ship, just make sure you're communicating what your new stance is, because theoretically, like the next speech after the POI or whatever happens has to be like a bit of a shift. Try to communicate how you make that shift as minimal as possible while still like remaining consistent with the rest of the narrative, like coming out of previous speeches. And just make sure that like everyone else on the bench knows what you're doing before you go up and like radically change something that doesn't need to be like radically changed in that instance. So just in that case, communication is really key, because someone also might have a better idea on how to like salvage an argument. Okay, so the last part of this presentation is like about what it means to communicate online via Zoom. These are a couple of things that have worked for Un and I in the past. If anyone has like great ideas and like something just worked spectacularly well, feel free to pitch in, because like this is just as new to us as it is to you. So the first thing is just like having a group chat open with other people. That means you can openly communicate. You can send text messages like as they come to your mind. The disadvantage to this is it's like you can't read things in like grouped parts, if that makes sense. Like if you have like individual ideas that need responding to, you can only read text messages obviously in the order like they flow in. So that's kind of like the drawback to it, but like obviously it's quick and efficient and you're like always seeing the newest thing. Another drawback is it's a bit hard to like kind of understand text messages that are very vague. Like if someone texts like, this doesn't make sense, obviously 2 minutes later, that text isn't going to make sense. If like you were speaking when that person sent that text message, like you're not going to understand what they were talking about. The second one is like probably going to be used more if there's like a lot of ideas that still need responding to, if your speaker has told you like they need a lot of help, or if there's like some kind of key shift that just needs to be discussed, then you can have a separate FaceTime call with the individual that you're trying to talk something through. The drawback to this one is kind of like, obviously it becomes a bit hard at a certain extent to have like two different like video chats going at the same time and like trying to talk to people over the other speaker, which is like kind of what happens in real life. But it's just a bit odd since it's over like some kind of like technological sphere or whatever. The third one that worked for us was like having just like a Google Doc open. The advantage to this is you can like group ideas. So let's say like someone writes like A2 economic harms or something. As more people like think of responses, you can just like add responses under that idea and it can all be like collectively in one place. When it comes to like information that like absolutely needs responding to, like I just like changed the font size and I would like put it in like a 100 point font so it like makes it look very important, like change the font to red, doesn't matter. Also, those things can like work collectively. So for instance, if you know someone's not looking at the doc, you can like message them aggressively and like a text and be like, hey, you need to look at the doc, look at the thing under like subtitled like economic harms or whatever, to just send them to that to make sure they know what it works. Any thoughts on this?
I think that like we've kind of come to the conclusion that like we like group chats the best. I think the important thing though is that since Elyse is very correct and you can only view text in chronological order, if you say things like this is a lie or this is stupid or like we should respond to this, like that is like very difficult to like go back to, even if you're giving the next speech and you don't check your text messages for 30 seconds, like you don't really know what they're referring to. So a better way to format things you're trying to communicate to your teammates, and something that like Jack on our team is really good at, is like doing like A2 brain drain and then listing what he wants you to say under it. So if they're making an argument and you disagree with it, like say AT and then like whatever it is, and then like say the responses. Like this is like a very easy thing to do, but it like really, really helps organizationally. Or like for instance, I'll put like at James weighing mechanisms for sub 3 : and then like just list stuff instead of just texting like this outweighs this because this is this. Like it makes it much more helpful whenever you like tag things, because then like your debaters know, like the other speakers know when to put things where. That's all I would say on that.
Yeah. And I think that legitimately is really helpful. Like she's right in saying that Jack is quite good at this. And sometimes I'll like copy and paste like something that Jack said in the chat onto a notes page on like another part of my computer so I know it won't move. And then I can like write something on my flow and be like, look at notes. So then I can like look at my computer and just read the responses straight off the computer that he wrote for me, which is essentially like passing a note card or whatever.
One other thing I would say is don't clog the chat. So oftentimes in round, like you turn to your teammates and like you make like cute little jokes about things and like that's fun. Don't do that don't do that if you are in round, because like the next speaker is using that chat to like actually like maybe help write their speech. So if you clog the chat with like little like one, like I did this morning, so I shouldn't like really be saying this.
I did this too.
Yeah, but like if you clog the chat, like I guess towards the back of the debate, like it's fine. But if you clog the chat early on with like roasts or just like funny little things, then like it's harder to find the things that the speakers actually need. And while it's like very like it's like fun and like you should like it's fun to like text and stuff, like make sure that the chat is open. If you're gonna like, if you want to make little one-offs, like make a separate group chat that doesn't include like, or like make like one group chat specifically for like this is just for info that will be in round, that will be in our speeches. This second group chat is maybe like our group chat where we like chat during round and like make funny jokes and stuff, because that is a large part of debate and I think like that's fun. You shouldn't like get rid of that. But yeah, that's all I would say.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that is the end of our chatting presentation. We still have about 5 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions really in relation to like this presentation or anything else, feel free to ask that now. Did you have anything to add before we let them?
Ice cream looks really unappetizing.
Yeah, well.
Like the presentation's really pretty, but I would not eat that. Anyways.
I can't tell the difference between that and normal ice cream.
It looks like cookie dough.
Okay.
He actually thinks it looks like cookie dough.
I think it's also like you can't take pictures of ice cream because it melts like under studio lighting. I think it's actually cookie dough. Like, do you know what I mean?
Oh, actually, it might be. You might be right.
That makes sense.
That would make sense. 'Cause
Also, it's a bit unnerving that there's literally like no melt. Like all ice cream has like the like glaze. It doesn't. Oh, sorry. Do you guys have questions? I'll stop recording and you guys can just ask questions.